Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Data Science for Everyone. My name is Markham Reed, and today we're going to be talking about loops. So first, let's start off with the kinds of loops. We're going to be talking about for loops and while loops today in Python. So first off, let's get started with for loops. Now, a for loop is used to iterate over some sort of sequence, okay? So something like a list, a tuple, a dictionary, a set, or even a string. Now, for loops, again, have this key word of for, okay, F-O-R. And again, it's very similar to other programming languages that help it iterate over. So let's maybe get started looking at just a basic loop. So let's say we have a some sort of list here. So let's say that we want some animals, okay? So maybe we want something like a dog, a cat, and let's say maybe a chicken. Now, if we want to loop over or iterate through any of these objects, we use the for keyword, and then we can have any argument in here that we want. So let's say, for now, let's say x in animals, and then we want it to do something. So in this instance, let's just use the print statement for x. So if we see here what's going on, okay, we have a couple different parts here, okay. First we have the iterable object, okay, so here we have our list, and then we have the keyword for, and then we use x in, this is another keyword in here, animals, and so it can take any type of iterable and it will iterate through. So if we run this, okay, we will get something. It should print something like dog, cat, chicken. All right, now, whoops, and again here, so animals is not defined, and again here I did something wrong and I have an extra in there. Whoops. And so if we rerun this and we see here what's going on, so notice now it prints out dog, cat, chicken. Now, just to prove that it doesn't really matter what this argument in is here, we can change this to some item, so some item in the list, and we have to change that then down here as well, okay? Both here and here, okay, each of these items here need to be the same, okay? Otherwise the loop will not work. And so this is just kind of a proof of concept that it does work. We can also work on utilizing something to iterate through a string, okay? So for I in, and then we can actually let's just do a string here, and so let's just say string, okay, and then let's have it print I. Now what will actually occur here is it will print out each of the letters individually as it iterates through. So it goes from starting at 0, 1, 2, and it kind of goes on and on, okay, all the way into the end of string. Now there are a couple specialties here, okay? We can also iterate through, again, like we said, dictionaries and all of that, but I'm just wanting to go through the very basics of loops today. If you guys want me to talk more about iterating through different types of items, please feel free to give us a comment, and I will make sure and come back and talk about those some more, but I want to try and keep this video a little short and just go over the very basics. Maybe let's do one more example here, and let's talk about maybe doing something like math with it, okay? So we can also do for num in, and then let's just give something like 2, 3, 4, and then let's say that we want to do some math on it, okay? So let's print out number multiplied by 2, okay, and we have that printout as well. And notice here what happens, it multiplied each number by 2, but it does not actually impact this list whatsoever. So if we, for example, called this, let's change this up just a little bit and say, call this numbers is equal to 2, 3, 4, and we'll have this go for num in numbers. And then we also want to maybe print out the numbers themselves, and we run this. We'll see here that it iterated through each of the items, okay, and multiplied them by 2. However, it did not do anything to the numbers list whatsoever, okay, and acted on each of the items inside of the list in a different memory space. So one other thing that we can do with for loops, okay, for loops cannot be empty. And so we need to have something inside there. And so if you need a placeholder, you can just use pass. So for x in 1, 2, 3. Now, if I leave this and just leave it empty, and I run this, notice an unexpected EOF while parsing. Again, it expects there to be something here. So we can do pass. And if we run this, it will run, but nothing will pop out because, again, we are not giving it any sort of statement in here besides pass. So now let's maybe move on to the break statement. Now, a break statement is fantastic when we're wanting to iterate through a loop, but for some reason, when it gets to a certain type, maybe we want to have it stop, okay? And we can use this with an if statement. So let's go through and maybe, let's go through our animals example again, and just a reminder, okay? So we can reuse that statement, but I want you guys to be able to see it. So let's just grab that list one more time so that you can see everything in a complete kind of containerized example. So for, let's just say x in animals, okay, and then we want to say print x, but then let's say if x is equal to, let's say cat, okay, we're going to have it break. Now when we run this, we'll see that it will print out dog, it will print out cat, but then again, it's going through this loop, okay, so this first iterable loop here, okay, so for x in animal, so it goes through dog, all right, then it'll go down, it'll print dog. Now if if dog is equal to cat, break. Well, dog is not equal to cat, so it goes back up to the top. So for x in animals, and that's going to be cat, so then it'll print cat, and then it goes back down and says, oh, if x is equal to cat, so cat is equal to cat, it'll break and it escapes out of the for loop. So for those of you that are using this for business applications or something, maybe you want to write a program that will do something only when a certain customer profile pops up, or only when a certain item in a menu even comes up, and you will iterate and do some program inside of here. One more thing that we can do, okay, is use the continue statement. And you know what? Let's do maybe one more example here, actually, now that I think about it, for the break statement. So let's do something like, we're going to create numbers again, but here we're going to have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then maybe let's do 10 as well. You know what? Let's even go through and go so far as to add in 1 in there as well. Now what we want to do here is, let's say that we want something that is equally divisible by 3. Okay, so if you guys remember at the beginning of the series, we talked about utilizing the mod. Okay, so if we do something like for num in numbers, okay, we want to maybe have it print only when a number is maybe divisible by 3. Okay, so then here we don't actually need anything. We would just go back and use an if statement. And so if, let's say, let's do this and actually make it a little bit more controlled. So if num mod 3 is equal to 0, okay, so, and then it'll print the number. So if we run this, you'll see here now it only gives us 3, 6, and 9. So again, you could do this in with mathematical terms. You can also, you don't necessarily have to keep in the parentheses in here, but if you want to chain together your operations, I have a tendency to keep this as is. We can also do this. Let's take a look and see what happens if we actually remove this here and we run this. Okay, it will just continually print out, okay, because we're not checking any type of equivalent statement in here. So make sure that you keep that equivalence in there so that this will evaluate either to true or to false. Otherwise, this is just a mathematical expression. So let's move on to the continue statement. Now, the continue statement is very useful. Again, so it will, for example, if you want it, instead of breaking out of a loop, okay, you may want it to continue, okay? So one way that we're going to be able to do that is do something like, okay, let's go back and we'll use our animal example. I'm actually just going to copy this whole thing here. We'll move it down here. And so let's say that we want this to just continue, and we want it to maybe do something else, okay, afterwards. And so let's maybe remove, we want it to maybe continue, and then we will have it break out and then print X. And now let's actually remove this print here. So what we expect to happen is for each animal inside of our list, if we grab a hold of a specific animal, we're going to continue and then print. And so what this will actually have us do is going to be a little bit different than our previous example. Here we see dog, chicken. Now what happens is, in this instance, instead of using printing out beforehand, we print out after we do the checking, okay? So we want this to skip the cat in this instance, okay? Because it will, for example, we'll just talk it through. If dog is equal to cat, well, dog is definitely not equal to cat, so it's not going to run this. It will jump down, it will print dog. It'll go back up, and it'll keep going. For X in animals, is cat equal to cat? That is true. So then it goes to continue. Continue is not going to print anything, but it will still stay within the loop. It'll go back, and it will double check here. All right, so if chicken is equal to cat, well, chicken is not equal to cat, then it's going to go back and print. So another thing that we can do is utilize else inside of loops. And now this is very, very useful when you want something to execute when the loop is finished. So let's say that we want something like, so let's say that if we're using an else statement in here, we want something like for X in numbers, okay? And if we remember our numbers, again, let me just go and grab it here so that we can have everything in one nice container here. So for X in numbers, we're going to say if X mod 2 is equal to 0, we want to say print is even. All right, and then here we can actually go through and skip out and then say else. We can say something like print done. Okay, and so this is very nice. And you know what this is? Let me do one more thing. So we actually want to print the X with that. And so we have here, whenever we're running this example, all right, so for, and it will, for some number in our numbers iterator, okay, or our object here, it's going to check and see here if it's even. So, and then it'll print even if it is even, and it'll run through that, and it'll keep doing that process until the very end. Once it can't do that anymore, it'll actually run out, escape out of this if block, okay, and then go to our else statement in order to conclude that piece. Now let's say that we want to maybe do something like a nested loop. Now we haven't really used the range function yet, and I will discuss that at the end, but just for this example for nested loops, I'm going to go on and use it. So we have something like for in range, and you know what? Just so that we don't have any issues, okay, with some of the concepts here, let me actually just go through and talk about the range function just for a second. Okay, and I'm going to go down here where my notes are, and we'll talk about the range function first. So this range function actually returns a sequence of numbers. It's going to start at 0 and it will increment up by 1. And it's going to stop before some specified number. So if we do something like range, and let's say 5. Now we run this, it will actually give us back a range object, which is actually just as a generator. Okay, it's not actually going to give us back that number, but if we wrap this in a list, we can actually see that it will give us from 0 all the way up to 5, but not including 5. So we usually use this in terms of a loop or something else, and I'll run an example here in a second. But let me also show you if you want to say you want it from 2 to, let's say, 6, and we run this. Okay, it'll start at 2 and it'll go up to, but not including 6. And we can also do something like, let's say we want to go 2 to 50, and we want to do it by 2s. Or no, you know what? Let's do it by 4s. And so here you see here, it'll go 2, 4, 2, 6, 10. It's actually going to be counting up by 2s. If you want to do this in other increments, that's actually going to be a bit of a problem, because if we run this and we say by 0.5s here, it's going to say, oh, it can't deal with float objects, okay? It expects an integer here. So the default is 1. Oops. The default here is 1. Okay, so if you want to have this increment by integers, you can. We can also do it by 3s, just to show you. And again, it'll have its start range. Now, if we want the start range to start at 0, as the default is, we can. Okay, and this is, whoops. We actually had this, and we actually need to type in 0 if we have the, we want to actually have all of the arguments in here. Now, when we use this in a string, or not in a string, in a for loop, so we have for x in range, and let's say 2 to 5, let's have it print x. And here, it'll actually go through and it will generate numbers as we need them. So let's go up and let's actually finish up with a nested loop example. So first, we'll actually let's make a multiplication table. Okay, so let's say for in range 2 to 10, and then we're going to do another for loop. So this is a nested, whoops, this is in the wrong location. Let's cut this and let's move this up to our nested for loops section. So, whoops, 4 to 10, and then we're going to have another for loop here, and let's say for m in range, let's say 2 to n. Okay, then we want to see if in, let's say, mod x is equal to 0. We want to do something like print in, whoops, in equals something like, oops, x multiplied by n divided by x, okay? And then we will have a break here, and then we will have something like else, let's say print in is a prime. Okay, so if we're wanting to find prime numbers, this is what we could do. So if we run this, so 2 is a prime, 3 is a prime, 4 equals 4 multiplied by 1, that's not going to be a prime. Okay, so again, here we're able to actually calculate up our primes based on using a nested loop. We can also do all other kinds of nice iterative sequences. Now, if you guys have any questions on this, please feel free to ask. Finally, let's move on to our while loops. Okay, and we'll do just a little bit of the basics on this, and then hopefully we will be done. So the The while loop, we can actually execute this with a set of statements as long as the condition is true. Now we're going to repeat something we want it to be identical or a very similar task without making errors. This is something that computers do well and humans do actually quite poorly. So let's say I is equal to 1, and we'll say while I is less than 6, we want to print I, and then let's say I plus equals 1. Now what this does here, this little plus equal sign, this plus equal sign is basically an incremental. All right, so it will increment by 1. So it'll increment I by 1 each time it goes. So now this will run and it will print the number I, and it should stop when I is less than, it'll keep going until, again, this is false. So when x or I is equal to 6, it's going to stop. So notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it stops at that particular instance. Now, if we utilize the break statement, okay, it's very useful for us so that we can, even if that break statement is true, maybe you have a very specific edge case with your data that you want it to stop, you can have it stop. So let's say I is equal to 1. We want the same example here. I is less than 6. We want to print I, and then let's say if I is equivalent to 3, we're going to have it break. Okay, and then so I plus equal 1. And we have this run here, and it's going to go 1, 2, 3, and it's going to stop. Okay, because again, we want it to break out of this particular loop here once it gets to 3. So if you have a special condition that you want it to stop at, you can have that happen as well. Now, let's go and do one more example for a continue statement. Now the continue statement, so let's say I is going to be 0, so while I is less than 6, we want I plus equal 1, and then if I is equal to 3 here, for example, here we're going to change this to continue, okay? And so here we're going to actually have it print I, and so it will actually print stuff out. It will skip 3, and then it will continue running. So if, again, you have maybe some sort of case where you don't want anything to happen with the data set, you can, and you can have it stop while and then just continue on with the application. Now let's do one more, and then we'll be hopefully, yes, based on the time, I'm going to have to stop. So I is equal to 1, we're going to be using an else statement. So while I is less than 6, we're going to print I, and then we will have I plus equals 1, and then we're going to use the else here to print I is no longer less than 6. So again, this is very useful when you want to if you have a specific condition. Sometimes you need maybe in your console, you need something to kind of pop up and say, hey, I'm done here. So if you're, for example, you're using a machine learning model and you're wanting to have it run an example, okay, or run an algorithm until, for example, your evaluance measure gets to a certain point and you want it to stop, this is how you can do that and have it actually tell you, hey, we're at that cutoff point. So I hope you guys enjoyed this section on loops. If you don't mind and you like this, please make sure and subscribe and click the like button, and I will see you guys next time.